We were a family of 6 children, and Father spent our younger days in the army where he was in Burma. I don't really remember him until I was 7-year-old when he came home from the army. We spent most of our younger life with our uncles. I used to go down the field with Glyn. He used to put me to sit on the tractor on the mudguard while he'd be down ploughing. I'd be lying on a sack with another sack over me to keep me warm in the winter. And that was how we were brought up, really. And Mother was used to look after her brothers, cook food and all for them when Father was in the army, and for her mother. And we were all one happy family, really. Before I left school, my uncle used to grow a lot of swedes and mangels and all to feed the animals in the winter. And in the summer when they were hoeing them and keeping the weeds and all clean, he used to put me on the horse. So we had one horse they then called Captain, and he'd put me on that with a horse behind, and I'd be following behind with Captain, and this horse knew exactly where to go. You didn't have to tell him. He'd go up and down the rows, but there was one part in the field which was a bit wet, but every time he come to that he'd go faster through that, so I'd be virtually swinging on the back of the horse to keep up with him. But that was all life. It was enjoyable, and that was our fun. That was one thing we used to do then when Father came home from the army. We used to have a long net in the nights in the winter, and we'd go rabbiting. Well, Father would run this net out down by the wood and set it all up, and he'd be there then waiting, and we'd go out into the field and we'd be shoving the rabbits all in through the hedge, beating the hedge then up, and then perhaps we'd have 3 or 4, or perhaps if it was a good night we'd have a few extra. And he used to take those then up to his parents in Dunvant, and they always had orders then for rabbits to help with extra money to buy stuff for us children and all.
John Tucker, The Beaches Farm, Horton. I was born in 1940 and I lived here all my life, and I'm 83 years old now. We used to milk in 1950, we used to milk 20 cows in a cow stall, and Father used to milk by hand and used to take the milk around the village in cans and measure out the pints in the jugs. And Father always smoked a pipe. He'd measure the milk in, and some ash would go on top of the milk and everything. How the people bought milk with him, I never know.
We used to have to cut corn with a binder, then we'd have to stook it all up, leave it for 3 weeks then, and then carry it, make ricks up the rickyard. Then we'd have to thatch them, then we'd thrash them in the winter then.
And to thatch them, we used to grow about 6 acres of wheat, and that'd be thrashed that'd be the first that you'd thrash, because you'd be using that straw to thatch the ricks and all, and that'd be all drawn out by hand. You draw it out to get longest bits you can get. Father used to do most of the thatching there then, and the rick would be as dry as can be, and when you come to thrash it. And then after we stopped doing that, then we used to go out by Broadpool and cut rush and use rush for thatching, but we still had to draw that out to get nice long pieces of rush, and it used to look lovely to see. You'd have 4 ricks on one side and then 4 mouths, which were the round ones you'd call them, and they'd all be thatched, and it used to look lovely when you were going into the rickyard with them looking at you, and a lot of those crafts are gone now, of thatching and things like that and all. It was like I said, we didn't know no different, but it was a wonderful experience that you'll never experience again.
I can just remember the thrashing. In the old days we used to thrashing machines. It wasn't combines, it was all sheaves. And we stopped at dinner, and they'd all come up to dinner, and this kitchen would be full, all people around having a cooked dinner, smashing them. And they'd eat and enjoy themselves, and then go back to work afterwards.
I'm Mike Taylor from Oldway in Bishopston, and my family got into market gardening, as most of the families living in Bishopston were involved in farming of some sort or another. Gran was saying there's always a big event when the steam thresher would come to the farm, and all the other farmers would come in and help for the day. The wives would all take different meals in, and food and sandwiches and what have you, and they'd move to the next farm. The steam thresher would move to the next farm, and they'd all migrate to that farm to help for a couple of days, whatever. And it was that sort of a community, very close community, obviously.
I remember the traction engine coming to thrash, and Walter Gwynn used to be running the engine.
John was saying that about the thrashing machine, where we used to go and help the other farms in the village then to thrash as well, and they'd come and help us. But there was one farm we used to go to, Penmain Farm, which was run by Sid Davis, and you've never had so many rats anywhere in your life, because down the bottom of the farm there was a sewerage bed that used to take the sewerage from the workhouse, as it was in the early days. And you'd be feeding that. If you was up in the thrashing machine, they'd be throwing sheaves up to you, well, there'd be little baby rats would be running over them, so you'd push them down into the thrashing drum, and it was nothing to have at least 100 rats a day when you was thrashing there.
And in the old days we had the mows, and when we thrash, the rats would run out of the mows, and we had a sheepdog would stand in the corner of the mow, and one day got 102 rats. Snap, 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 and they're all dead. Old dog goes Shep.
When we were cutting the corn, we'd go round and round the field, and the rabbits would be going into the middle. And then when you finished, the rabbits would run in everywhere, and we'd chasing them and catching them. Then we'd have rabbit for dinner then. Skin it and gut it, and then mother put stuffing in it. It was quite nice.
And the spare rabbits we had, we used to go around the village then and sell them to people half a crown, which was 2 shillings and 6pence. So it was a tremendous amount of rabbits about, because the headland around your cornfields, there was no corn there, the rabbits had eaten all that. So you lost that to start with, but what you gained on, at least you had fresh rabbits for dinner, and also it wasn't all eaten by the rabbits, because you ended up eating the rabbits, so it was come and get me type of thing.
In the old days when the binder used to go round and round and round, and all the rabbits used to be frightened, and they'd all run into the middle. But of course when it got smaller and smaller and smaller, the rabbits decided to run out. And we'd all the villagers up, boys up, catching the rabbits as they ran out. Because in the old days, the people loved eating rabbits. There was a diet in the village. People used to love rabbits. We used to run, and all the boys come up to the village and run over us. It was a wonderful time. Catch a rabbit, hit them in the back of the head.
Home for tea.
Home for tea, that's right.
You'll be there waiting, would you?
Yes, waiting. And once one was shouted, run over there, and we'd all run over there and chase it. And of course the rabbit didn't know where to go then, because so much noise, all the boys shouting, they just got there.
I'm Mike Taylor from Oldway in Bishopston. The first bus that my great-grandfather bought off Mr. Roach was a Gower Vanguard bus. And in the winter he used it as a lorry, and in the summer he put a roof on it and used it as a charabanc. A lot of businesses developed from the public being taken to remote areas via the buses. And obviously with the Gower having some very picturesque places, lovely ideal places for holiday makers, it would have been the start of the introducing holiday makers to the Gower. Bus companies would have had a big part in that all over the country, I suppose, taking people about.